Hello, everybody, and welcome to this webinar. This is Christopher Bosen from the Improvement Service speaking. We're going to start now, and during this webinar, I'm going to be sort of managing the technical side and handing over the screen and presentations to my colleague Sandra Sankey from the Improvement Service and our colleagues who are sitting in London, Steve Stillwell and Rebecca Graham from the Money Advice Service. You are all the attendees are muted. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So if you have any questions, you are welcome to use the question box on your right hand in the control panel and write the questions. And then when we get to the Q&A session, I'm gonna pass the questions on to Sandra and Steve and Rebecca. If you have any technical questions during the webinar, you're also welcome to use this, and I will write an answer to you on the screen. The first presentation is going to be the first introduction is going to be from my colleague, Sandra Sankey. So in a moment, I'm going to hand over to her. But welcome, everybody. We are going to be recording this webinar, and it is going to be made available after the webinar. You also got to get more information through the email you signed up with. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Sandra. And first of all, I'm going to unmute her and then present her.
Good morning, everyone. I am Sandra, one of the project managers on the Improving Outcomes in Money Advice project, which is a partnership project between the Improvement Service and the Money Advice Service. Hopefully many of you are already familiar with some aspects of our work. Further details and links to our project web pages will be provided at the end of the webinar. The project is actually in its and it's funded to deliver on a range of initiatives as well as help share the learning from others. Such things we may cover areas are linked with improved funding arrangements for advice services, performance management, the referral pathways, service delivery models, partnership working and so on. For this year going forward, we wish to have an interest to help support financial capability interventions. The Improvement Service is a member of the Scotland's Financial Capability Steering Group, and we wanted to show our commitment to delivering on the Scotland Financial Capability Action Plan. It's with this in mind that we agreed to help organisations who may wish to have a go at using the Youth Practice Outcomes Framework, which you're going to hear about today, and work with the Money Advice Service and other key stakeholders to deliver on this. Just to highlight that the framework for public funding of advice sets out key principles for funders to take into account when basing future funder decisions around advice services, and that includes ensuring that there are sufficient resources in place to implement monitoring process around evidence and evaluation. Our project has a keen interest in national funders and providers to help them embed the key elements of the framework. So improving evidence and evaluation is at the heart of the financial capability strategy. So now that I've briefly outlined our key interest in this project for this piece of work, I'm going to hand over to Steve and Rebecca, who will continue with the webinar.
Hi there, everyone. Good morning. My name is Rebecca Graham, and as Sandra says, I work at the Money Advice Service down in London. I am Research and Evaluation Manager, and I sit within the Insight and Evaluation team there. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about the background to the Youth Practice Outcomes Framework, and I'll give you an overview to start with of why we're here today. So the webinar, oh, do we have a screen showing there? I think, yeah, show screen. You should be able to see a screen right now, which gives the overview of what we're going to talk about in this next section of the webinar. So we'll start off with just a little introduction to why we're here. Then I'm going to talk a bit about the background to the outcomes framework, including, as Sandra mentioned, putting it into the context of the financial capability strategy. And then I'm going to hand over to Steve, and he'll tell you a little bit about the Youth Practice Outcomes Framework more specifically. And then there'll be an invitation to join in with the pilot of the Youth Practice Outcomes Framework. So this slide you'll see is a bit of an elaboration of the previous one, really. So we're going to talk about how the Youth Practice Outcomes Framework was developed, and more importantly, perhaps why we developed it. And as part of that, I will talk a little bit about the other outcomes frameworks that we already have in existence. It may be that some of those are useful in your work as well. So can we go back?
Sorry. Can I just interrupt? I'm really bad to say this. I've got the wrong slide presentation up. Can you just hold with me for a minute? I'm really sorry. I've got the wrong one up here. So bear with me, please, if you could.
So while we're just dealing with some slight technical issues there, I can carry on telling you a little bit about what we're talking about in this presentation.
Steve and Rebecca, yeah. I've just put up on the screen. Are you ready again?
Yes, I am. Sorry, I really apologise. That's totally my fault.
Okay, and handing back to you.
Yeah. Or I can apologise and say it's my age. No, I've still got the wrong one. I'm having problems climbing to putting the right one up here. That's the one. That's the one I want. Okay.
That should be fine. So just click no there.
No, it keeps clicking to the wrong one.
Sorry about this, guys. We're just trying to get a slight technical issue sorted, but it shouldn't take too long.
Okay.
Steve,
yeah, I'm back. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
There.
That's it. I've gone off.
Sorry about that. Can we just go back on?
Yeah,
okay. Fine. Fantastic. So we're hoping that now that we're back on track, throughout the course of this webinar, you'll be able to understand a bit more about what the Youth Practice Outcomes Framework is, and perhaps more importantly, how it can help support your organisation to improve the quality of the interventions and the work you're doing with young people to help with their financial capability. You'll hear about our plans for piloting the Youth Practice Outcomes Framework, because it is a brand new framework, so we'd like to get people on board with that. And you'll hear about how you can actually go about getting involved in that. So to put it in the context of the financial capability strategy, and particularly the Scotland financial capability strategy, the Money Advice Service has done a large piece of research, and this research has actually shown that around 2/5 of Scottish adults are not confident about managing their money. And the research also showed that those who manage less well with their money tend to be at the younger age groups, so younger working age adults, particularly in that 18 to 24 bracket that you see there, those who are recipients of benefits and those who are tenants in social housing. But it's worth noting that the problems are not just confined to those particular groups. So the Scotland Financial Capability Strategy was developed in consultation with a wide number of stakeholders across Scotland, and it sets out how the Money Advice Service will work with the sector to help improve financial capability across the nation. At the heart of the strategy is a vision for a highly effective financial capability sector, but that is underpinned by an evidence base for what works well and less well in improving people's financial capability. And that evidence base is the really important thing, and that's sort of the bit that we're focusing on today. So we'll see in the next slide what this involves. So there at the top, we've got the vision of lots of effective programs, whether they're programs, tools, interventions, that have been shown to work in improving people's financial capability. And in order to do this, we are bringing organizations together to understand what works. So it's about creating a common agenda and making sure that we have a coordinated program of work. We're also building evaluation capacity. That relates to a lot in my team, building evaluation tools, hoping to create a shared language so people know what we're talking about when we talk about evaluation, and providing support to organizations to help with their evaluation practice. And also sharing. So this is about sharing what we've learned. So when we do evaluations, we don't want to just keep it to ourselves. We want it to be shared so that as many people as possible can learn from what we've done. So for that, we have things like the Evidence Hub, which is where we can share information, insights, research, etc., from the work that we've done. It's really the second point that we're going to be looking at today, talking about the Youth Practice Outcomes Framework. This will sit within our evaluation toolkit. We created a free-to-use evaluation toolkit, which is to help people generate that evidence that we want. It contains guidance, which includes short overview papers and longer guidance documents to help people get started with evaluation. Some tools, which include our financial capability outcomes frameworks, which are the focus of today's presentation. But there are also some templates, forms and things that you can actually help hopefully make it a bit simpler when conducting evaluations. And the toolkit as a whole is available on our website, the ThinkApp website. That is www.thinkap.org.uk, and there's lots of different information on there. But you'll see on your screens the link is specifically for the evaluation toolkit if you're interested in going and having a look and seeing what is already up there. So, as I mentioned, there are a series of outcomes frameworks which sit within the evaluation toolkit. These outcomes frameworks are made up of higher level outcomes, lower level outcomes and indicators, which suggest when a person might be achieving those outcomes, and some questions which are mainly intended for sort of quantitative impact type evaluations. So they look at pre and post measurement, seeing if there's a difference in someone's financial capability before they've been part of some sort of program or intervention or used a tool, and afterwards. The frameworks can also be used for different types of evaluations, but it's sort of focused on that quantitative impact evaluation in particular. At the moment, we already have published outcomes frameworks for adults, for children and young people, for parents, and for teachers. Both of those are slightly different from adults in their own right, because they're about parents and teachers as the messengers of good financial capability for young people, and for older people in retirement. And I'm going to hand over to Steve, and he's going to talk a bit more about the new outcomes framework, which, as you know, is for youth practice.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. As Rebecca just said, some of our frameworks are not necessarily aimed at the end beneficiary in terms of children and young people, but actually on the trusted intermediaries, the channels, the people who are involved in supporting and helping people become more financially capable. When we developed the Teachers' Outcomes Framework about 18 months ago, it became very clear from that whilst that is very helpful for people who are teaching with a curriculum context, so teachers in Scotland working through a curriculum of excellence, but when you are working with people who are outside that framework, then the Teachers' Framework didn't work. So the Youth Practice Outcomes Framework is very much aimed at those people who are helping and working with young adults and young people develop their financial capability, but are not within that school context. So it could be, for example, if you're working within statutory authorities like a local authority, it could be a voluntary community charity organisation or a faith service. It could be somebody who's involved in a corporate CSR program where they have volunteers who are going out and supporting financial capability of young people, or it could still be in the education sector, but perhaps outside the school sector. So we're talking here about the further education sector, or where you have youngsters who are not in a traditional school setting. So the primary purpose is really twofold. At one level, it's for the practitioner. At one level, it's about helping the practitioner identify if they have the skills, knowledge, attitudes, and opportunity to deliver positive outcomes for young people around financial capability. And is it done in a way that actually is going to create an impact in terms of the young adults? But we also realised, just with the teachers one, that you cannot do it in isolation. Somebody working on their own cannot do that in isolation from the organisation that they work for. So in addition to looking at outcomes for practitioners, we've also included an element which is for the organisation, because the two, the individual and the organisation, are really, really important. How was it developed? It was developed by a consortium of organisations that helped develop the framework. We held some initial stakeholder interviews to get the framework, to get the first idea going, but then we had a series of consultation workshops in England, Scotland, and in Wales. And in fact, we had the one in Edinburgh, which was hosted by young Scottish, if my memory serves you right, attended by 20 people. And actually, the 20 people on the slide you can see on the side there does actually portray some of the outcomes, some of the conversations that took place during that event. So the key features of the outcomes framework that's been developed is that although it's got two strands, one aimed at individuals and one at organisations, they both use the same core element. So one is about one is about understanding young people's financial capability. One is about engaging young people in financial capability, and finally, it's about promoting financial capability behaviours in young people. So even though we have one aimed at individuals and one at organisations, the core elements of the practice, the good practice elements, are the same, because those three things really underpin what is good practice in terms of financial capability for young adults. For each, we have a core element of bank statements, and for each statement, the organisation or individual is asked to really rank themselves, identify them, to which extent they feel that particular statement applies to them. And the ratings are 1 not present, 2 working towards it, partially in place, and 4 established. So it's very much a self-help tool, both pre and post, in terms of helping people and organisations develop their effective practice. I've got here just a small example of it, so you can see what it looks like. This actually is taken from the individual one, and this is focusing on the strand around understanding young people's financial capability. And as you can see underneath that, there are both information about that particular area. There's information about the strands, and then you have the statements that relate to that. So this sort of format is replicated in the 2 other strands of the individual one, and also for the organisation one. So there is read across the 2, because we think that's really important. So how might it be used? Well, I've just got 2 examples here. I mean, it could be that the head of children, young people and families wants to and is involved in delivering financial capability, both direct and commissioned, within its area. And you could use the Youth Practice Outcomes Framework during an annual review to monitor performance and perhaps improve performance over the next period of time. It could be delivered by a programme manager in a charity who again wants to look at how effective their financial capability is in the work they're doing with young adults. I mean, other examples could be within the head of student services in an FE college, or it could be by somebody in a company where they have a CSR program, which involves volunteers going out and working with young adults to develop their financial capability, and again looking at what are the material and the support that those people need in that job. So we're at the stage where we want to pilot it. It was developed the first part of this year, but we need to test it, and really this is what this seminar is all about. We're asking for people, a small number of organisations, to have a go, and it is very much at that sort of level, over the next period of time, really up until the end of this year. Doesn't have to be all of the framework, it can be one bit, it can be a bit that you are particularly interested in developing within your organisation. And the sort of data that we look to identify are clearly the type of organisation and the work they do, but particularly we're interested in feedback in terms of how easy is it to use. We're looking for feedback around the appropriateness of language and style for the target users, And finally, so does the framework stimulate action to improve practice? And I think for us, that's a really key element here, because if the framework is going to be effective, it needs to inform and help financial capability. So that's the real sort of focus what we want to do. The information gathered from that will help us develop and the framework for a wider launch in 2018. We're also looking to create some case studies of how organisations use, because we know that the organisations who could use this will come from a very wide sector, and we want to be able to show other organisations the sort of approach that organisations like them have used. So that really is the main element of what we're asking for and the reason for this. As Sandra said, we're working in Scotland through the Improvement Service, and Sandra is leading on this. So if you want to be involved in this, then Sandra is there, although I think they will also appear a bit later on. We're going to move it over now to some questions and answers. I know that Sandra just wants to tie this bit up, but while she's doing that, you might want to think of some questions which we'll put to Rebecca or myself or Sandra, and we're happy to answer them, or if we can't answer them now, we'll get back to you. So that's all for me. Can I first of all apologise for the technical problem to begin with? It wasn't technical, it was me not putting up the right presentation. So I do apologise, but hopefully interfere too much with our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, so for some of you participating in the webinar today, you may already have had contact with me. The next steps will be for me to continue to follow up with all the key stakeholders who have expressed an interest in having a go at using the framework, and for any of you that wish to contact now following the webinar. I'm keen to learn more about what each organisation does and how we can best support your organisational and individual needs. Sorry, moved on too far. So our project will work with you and the Money Advice Service on a range of support, which may include some hands-on support, perhaps creating and facilitating a network of support, looking at the knowledge sharing, any workshop sessions, and as Steve mentioned earlier, we'll be looking at producing some case studies from the learning from this piece of the work. So that will all be determined fully as we move on with this work. So I'd like to thank everyone that's expressed an interest in having a go so far, and I'll be in touch soon to discuss the next steps and approach going forward. The deadline for expressions of interest we thought we would set for the end of the 18th of August, and then hopefully the week starting the 21st of August, I'll have a follow-on meeting with Steve and Rebecca to discuss the next steps. So I'd like to take this opportunity also to help raise some awareness of the upcoming Financial Capability Week, which will be happening in November this year, between the 13th and 17th of November. There's going to be lots of activity happening throughout that week and media attention around this as well. There will be a participation pack, which is likely to be issued out at the end of August, hopefully, which will encourage organisations to be involved in that week, and some of you participating today may wish to have an interest in that. So if you do wish to discuss anything about that in the meantime, I'm certainly happy to have a chat with anyone. So before bringing this webinar to a close, I also just want to remind you of ways to stay informed with the outcomes from the Money Advice Outcomes project. So I mentioned earlier I would give you a link to our project web pages. We also have a Knowledge Hub group for the purpose of sharing information in our project, and a link where you may wish to sign up for the Improvement Service newsletters, which will also include anything that we publish, but also include wider business from the IS Improvement Service and wider partners. So I'd like to thank Christopher, thanks very much for helping to run the webinar today, and Steve and Rebecca from the Money Advice Service for their involvement, and especially for you all for your participation. And I hope to have future contact with you, and you can reach me via my email address or mobile that I've provided. So we're now ready to go forward with the question and answer session. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra, and thank you, Steve and Rebecca. At the moment, I don't have that many questions. Actually, I don't have any questions for you. So, Steve, when you came on, I don't think you were introduced properly. So maybe you want to introduce yourself as well to the audience. So,
okay. I'm Steve Stillwell, and I'm a financial capability manager here at the Money Advice Service. I should also say that we're also working with a number of other organisations to get some trials for this outcomes framework. So, for example, in England, we're working with UK youth to have some of their organisations involved, and also be working in Wales with a couple of organisations involved. So we're looking at getting activity across the whole of the UK.
Okay, great. Just gonna give you a few more minutes to use the questions box if there are any. Rebecca, do you have anything further for this one as well? Or do you want to introduce yourself as well again, because we did get you, I think, in the beginning, but what areas you're working on?
That's absolutely fine. Yes, I would just say that as I work with the rest of the insight and evaluation team across a whole range of different insight and evaluation projects, and it probably really is worth having a look at the FinCap website, having a look at the evaluation toolkit for people who haven't already or aren't too familiar with it. There might be lots of other things on there that are interesting and useful for different sorts of projects. That may not just be youth practice, may not be just young adults and those sorts of age groups. There are a whole range of tools on there that could be useful. So do have a dig around. And if you have any questions, there are email addresses listed on that website and within the toolkit where you can contact us if you need further support in using any of the stuff that's on there.
Okay, thank you. And now, luckily, we have people asking questions. So from Anne Gordon, we have the question. I work in a HEI, that's a higher education institution, I believe, and it's a member of NASMA, National Association of Student Money Advisor. NASMA is already keen on financial capability, so I was wondering how this framework could work into our practice. Steve and Rebecca?
Okay, yes, that I can answer. Yes, NASMA I know well of old and also currently. We have one of our steering groups, Young Adult Steering Group, and Annie Bailey from NASMA sits on that. Interestingly, I know that not Rebecca or I, but one of our colleagues is working with NASMA to develop a toolkit to support NASMA members, and in fact, the outcomes framework is going to be built into that. So that there really is an opportunity in the HR sector to use this as a way of looking at practice.
It's great. We also have the obligatory question if we are going to send out the presentation and links to the toolkit. And I believe, yes, we are going to send out the presentations after this webinar. And there will be a link to the toolkit. There will be a link to the work that Improvement Service is doing, and there will be a link to the Money Advice Service toolkit as well. We will also make the recording of the webinar available, so you will be able to see the webinar afterwards as well. And then we have Joanna, not a question, but telling us that there's credit union in Moray, and they will be very interested in taking part of this. And then we just had a question. A question from Trudy, and I can't pronounce last name Deutsch. Would this framework be suitable for children and young people with additional support needs?
Yeah. Yes. The answer is yes. Yes. Very simple answer.
It's designed to be applicable to a wide range of organisations. So while the outcomes aren't specific outcomes for the end beneficiaries, the children and young people themselves, it's more about the organisation, and as such it should apply to a wide range of organisations, including those who are dealing with some more specific vulnerabilities and specific situations.
Yeah.
Thanks. I can see we have another question coming in from Mary. There might be some, yes. Before we get that question from Mary, there's a question from Colin Campbell saying, can Sandra expand on who the Financial Capability Week is aimed at? Just youth or adults too? And what kind of things are planned for that? So that's for my colleague Sandra.
Hi. Okay. Hi there. Yes. Well, what I can say to you is that we'll be encouraging organisations to get involved during the Financial Capability Week. So we'll be looking at employers getting involved, and your own organisation and what you can do to engage with your wider communities. There will also be, we've discussed looking at a practitioner event. So that many of you participating in the webinar today, we wish to be involved with that. But as I mentioned earlier, there will be a participation pack coming out soon with some guidelines around, how you can get involved and who to engage with, and a bit of guidance to help organisations get on board on that. Hope that helps.
Sandra, you were asking, is it for youth or adults too? Is it both for youth and adults, or just for youth?
What, for this framework?
The Financial Capability.
No, the Financial Capability Week will be open to everyone, but for practitioners to really get involved, organisations, to look at how they engage with their communities, and that will be inclusive of all.
Great, thank you very much. And I have a question now from Mary come through. That's for Steve and Rebecca, I believe. Would it be possible to give a flavor of what kind of activities are in the toolkit? Mary is particularly interested in the toolkit being used for school leavers with limited or no income. And do you also give information about how young people could get a bank account? Sometimes this is very difficult for young people to access due to lack of ID.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit about that one. The toolkit itself that I was talking about earlier is an evaluation toolkit, so it's more based at what organisations might do to assess their work, and as I say, to try and generate more evidence about what is effective. It's less focused on creating direct tools that are specifically to help young people or school leavers or care leavers, for example, but there are a wide range of tools out there, and that might can speak a bit more about offline and perhaps provide some links and things to resources that we know about.
Yeah, so we are going to provide email addresses to Rebecca and Steve as well in the follow-up email from here. We have another question. Can you please, this is from Stephen Curran, can you please say a bit more on the need for a range of early adopters, such as a mix of urban and rural communities or young people with different experiences, including those looked after and accommodated by local authorities?
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, I think what we're looking for is across the whole of the UK and obviously within the 4 countries of the UK. Then we're looking for a broad spread as we can. So it would be really great if we can get some that are in urban areas, some in rural areas. It would be very good if we could get some which are dealing with particular groups of young adults, young people. So we are really trying to get that spectrum. What Sandra and I, Rebecca, will do is once we know who is interested in taking this forward, then we'll look to make sure that there is that sort of span, because as I said earlier on, what we're really keen to do is to be able to get some stories, some journeys that different organisations have used to in terms of using the outcomes framework. So that range, I think, is really, really important.
Great, thank you very much. We have question from Nicola Hill as well. Sorry that my screen just changed away from that. And this shows that I'm not an expert, but a vocal carers organization. Nicola asks, how much support is available to implement framework? A number of the frameworks are potentially irrelevant to us, however, slightly concerned at how we can implement. I don't know if that's for Stephen or...
Yeah, in terms of the pilot for the Youth Practice Outcomes Framework, I think we are intending to provide a sort of level of tailored support depending on what sorts of organisations it is that ends up sort of signing up to the pilot, as it were. In terms of the other outcomes frameworks and the toolkit and so on, we have a range of support available from within MAS, which you can get involved in by, as I say, looking on the ThinkApp website. Getting in touch with us, telling us about your needs, and we take it from there.
Sandra, did you have something for that as well?
Just to say that when I follow up and have some engagement with anyone that's expressed an interest, we can have a bit more in-depth conversation about that and what that might be involved.
Great, thank you very much. We have a question from Karen Grimer. My name is Karen and I head up our financial education courses at the charity Christians Against Poverty. Volunteers for our charity deliver kids, youth and university student courses. I was wondering how the framework would be used to access the effectiveness of our existing material if we were to go ahead with trialing the framework. Would the young people themselves be assessed on how well they have absorbed the material? I think that's for Steve and Rebecca.
Take that one.
Yeah, I think there clearly there are two levels here, because at one level, this particular framework is focusing very much in terms of the skills and abilities and the context of both the individual practitioner, but also the organisation that they are involved with. So it's looking at that level. In terms of looking at the actual materials, it may very well be that one of the outcomes from the framework is to look at the materials and actually maybe collect some information, which may already been doing, I don't know, in terms of the evaluation and the impact that material is doing. So I think the two are really sort of very much intertwined, because clearly part of this is looking at the effectiveness and the impact of any intervention, whether it be sort of a one-to-one conversation or whether it be through printed or online material.
Thank you very much. We also have a question from Helen McCabe. I have not yet seen the youth framework, but I'm interested to know what focused work has been done around youth, ethnic minority adults who have cultural barriers using advice services. I'm interested to know what focused work has been done on the framework with this in mind.
Okay. I'm not sure. I think that may be a question that I need to answer offline, because that's not something which I have to hand. So maybe if you can ask the questioner, or if you give the information out, as you said, Christopher, then we'll get a response to that one.
Yeah, we have the questions here noted down, and we have the email address of the asker, obviously. I don't have any further questions, so we'll just give it one more minute or two, and then I might round up. Do you have anything further to add, Rebecca and Steve?
I don't think we do. No, thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity, though.
And Sandra, do you have anything?
Just following the webinar, if you do still continue to, have questions that pop into your head, things that you want to ask, feel free to get in touch with myself at any time.
Thank you. And it doesn't seem that we have any more questions coming in, so I'd like to thank both Sandra, Steve, and Rebecca for hosting this webinar, and thank you all for attending. There will be a follow-up questionnaire sent to you after this webinar, and it would be very helpful if you would fill it out. Some of them are technical questions around how the webinar worked, but there are also some questions to inform our work around this framework, both at the Improvement Service and with Money Advice Services. If you have any further questions, you can contact Sandra on the email address that is shown here, and we will also send out the email address of Steve and Rebecca, so you can ask questions directly of the framework there if necessary. As we said, this was recorded, so if you want to see the webinar again or hear the questions again, there might be a chance for that. But otherwise, thank you very much. There are no further questions, so I'll end the webinar, and thank you all for attending.